Welcome to this special USA webinar focusing on buying French real estate and moving to France. I'm Karen Tate. I'll be your host for the next hour. I'm a freelance journalist in the UK. For the past 20-something years, I have been editing French property news magazine, and I also contribute to titles such as the Sunday Times. I'm joined today by our expert panelists. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. Our expert panelists who are eagerly awaiting discussing with you real estate, the visa process, currency, healthcare, mortgages, and more. Before we get started on our questions, I'll just hand over to them to introduce themselves. Joanna? I think you're still muted.
Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Leggett. Thank you for joining us this evening, and I hope we can help you with all your questions. So I'm one of the Leggett family members. You may have seen me on our USA buying guides or YouTube videos. So we're here to handhold and help you with every step of the way. We've been established since 1998, so been in France. We started off in a small little village, and now we've expanded so we cover the whole of France with over 700 agents, and two of our lovely guys are on the panelists tonight. So welcome everyone.
That's great, thanks Joanna. And over to Andrew.
Hi everybody, my name is Andrew Guck. I am a real estate agent here in the south of France, and I am the area coordinator of the Carcassonne team, where we have a team of about 30 agents to help take care of you and all your real estate needs in this area. And I'm originally from upstate New York, and I also work with Joanna Leggett here and the rest of the Leggett team in France. So we look forward to answering your questions today and helping you with the search of your dream home in France. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Very lucky man living in the Carcassonne area. Mm-hmm. And over now to Alison.
Hello, my name is Alison Grantley-Ness. I am a relocation agent helping people to get the right visa and do the right French admin to follow their dream of living in France and create a successful and sustainable life here. And I'm also the author of Foolproof French Visas.
Lovely, thanks Alison. And Paulette?
Hey everybody, my name's Paulette. I'm the co-founder and director of Agence AXA International. We're a specialist English-speaking agency, AXA agency, covering the whole of France, so we can help you no matter what your insurance needs are. I'm also director of L'Onomy, which is our broker side of the agency, which is a specialist for visa health insurance. I would be happy to answer any of your questions.
Lovely, thanks Paulette. And Sharon?
Hi everybody, I'm Sharon Revol. I'm a French mortgage broker. I'm based in the Alps area of France, and I look after a team of 15 international brokers at CAFP International, and we can finance your dream of owning a property in France. So I look forward to explaining a little bit more in more detail later.
Thank you. And Jonathan?
Hi, good evening, Karen. Good evening, everyone. My name's Jonathan Watson. I'm senior trader at Lumon, international payments specialist. So we specialise in currency transfers for foreign property transactions with real expertise in the French market. I've been here for 15 of our 25 years of trading, and last year we traded around £7 billion worth of currency all over the world. So I've helped thousands of people in my time, and I've got a real interest in France, real passion for the country. I love traveling there. I'm broadcasting from London tonight, and as well as really enjoying France and loving the culture and of course property there, I'm also very interested in the foreign exchange market, so I look forward to sharing some of our ways that we can assist you.
Lovely, thanks Jonathan. And our final panelist is Brad, who's been having some technical problems. Can you hear me, Brad?
I hear you just fine. Thank you so much.
Oh, fantastic. If you'd like to introduce yourself, you're just in time.
Cheers. My name is Brad Turner. I'm up in the Bordeaux area, so west coast of France, just in the south. I'm an agent with Leggett. I've been here for almost 7 years, and it's a pleasure to be part of the panel.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brad. So let's start by taking a look at French real estate. We get a lot of questions from people wondering about the process for Americans buying in France. The good news is there's no restrictions on non-EU nationals buying in France. The process is very safe and really well regulated, really protects the buyer. Joanna, so could you run through the main stages of the buying process?
Yes, certainly. The great thing about France is the buying process is very, very safe. Unlike other countries, even me coming from the UK, you can't really get gazumped at all. It's probably completely different to how it is in the States, but it's quite a straightforward sort of way how it runs here. So you basically find your property with your agent. And in France, the buying agent and the selling agent are generally the same person. That can be different in the USA, but I'm sure Andrew and Brad will talk about that later. So you basically find your property, you put your offer in, and then the compromis de vente, which is the exchange of contracts, is drawn up. If we have all of the paperwork already there, that can be done within a week. The buyer would always sign that compromis first, and then the vendor would sign. Once the vendor has signed, the seller, they can't pull out of the sale. But the buyer is protected, so you can put in suspensive clauses. So say you wanted permission for a swimming pool, or you wanted to convert a barn into habitation or something like that. All of those can be suspensive clauses. And a mortgage, of course, if you're looking at getting a mortgage, that could be a suspensive clause. If after 10 days, you'd need to send over a 10% deposit to the notaire that would be working alongside our contracts team on the sale. And after that 10 days is up, you can't withdraw from the sale unless one of those one of the things in the compromise isn't met. So say you were refused the mortgage, or the planning was refused on the swimming pool, or etc., etc. For that reason, you could pull out. If there is no reason to pull out and you're happy to go ahead with a sale, I think they take probably longer than they do in the States, maybe 3 to 4 months for them to go through, sometimes longer if it's a big inheritance. But generally speaking, it's really straightforward, it's extremely safe, and with us, particularly as an agency, we translate all of those compromise documents and help you with translations all along the way as well.
Lovely, thanks, Joanna. So one of the things that often comes as a surprise to American buyers is that in France, there's no MLS, no multiple listing system. Andrew, would you like to explain how it works in France?
Absolutely, Karen, I'll be happy to explain. So as Karen mentioned, there is no MLS system in France. Basically what that means is you might actually see the same property listed with multiple agents. We also do have an exclusive listing process here, which means a single agent can have the listing of the property. Just because we do not have this MLS system in France, it does not mean that an agent can't show you properties that are with another agency or are being sold by the owner directly. What that means is that we have to do what's called a mandat de recherche. And the fact that we have this search mandate with you, it's essentially gives us the authority to then contact other agents and request that we show those properties to you as a client. Sorry, I've just got an error message for my sound. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, so basically once you sign the search mandate with an agent, and we've got 30 agents on my team down here, and so depending on the exact area you want to work with, I would put you in touch with the agent that would be best qualified for the area where you're searching. And with that search mandate, first of all, they would always look within the Leggett network to see what other properties we have with other agents within the Leggett network. And then based on your criteria, they would also then help search within other agencies. I'm pretty close to several other agents at other agencies as well. And I have worked with other agencies to help my buyers find properties. And in some cases, I've even had situations where a vendor was selling their house privately on Le Bon Coin, which is essentially like the Craigslist of France. And the buyer was highly interested in the house. So I essentially found the house, contacted the owners, and we went directly to them and approached them and ended up managing the sale for my buyers for that property throughout the process. So that's a little bit about how it works. The benefits of having the search mandate means that you're going to have an agent who can work on your behalf to help not only negotiate the sale, but also to make sure that everything is working in your interest. That being said, it's important to note that in France, a real estate agent works for both parties equally and a nonpartisan way, just as a notaire does, which means I've had sales where I have the listing for a property. I'm the listing agent, but I'm also working as the buyer's agent. And essentially, we're highly trained by Joanna Leggett and her team at the head office there in France on how to essentially negotiate sales and work for both parties in the best way possible. So making sure everything is fair for everybody involved. And the notaires also swear an oath in France to do the same. So it's not like in the US where a buyer has their lawyer and a seller has their lawyer and everybody's fighting everything out. It's more, I would say it's much more friendly, and people are quite astonished by that when they come to France and they buy a house. And we go to the notaire's office and everybody's there together, the buyers and the sellers. The notaire is very friendly, and a lot of people sometimes end up laughing and making jokes and things like that throughout the process. So it is a bit, I would say it's a bit more laid back process in some ways, in the sense that it's not as formal, having I've got my lawyer, you've got your lawyer, and then the buyers don't even meet the vendors in some cases, like that happens in the US. So I hope this helps explain the lack of the MLS system in France. But it's not necessarily a disadvantage. And if anybody has any questions, you'll see my contact details at some point, and I'll be happy to answer any questions or put you in touch with an agent on my team to work with you.
Great, thanks, Andrew. I think it's very reassuring to people that agents in France do work so closely with buyers and sellers. So another thing is that the internet has obviously made it really easy to look at properties wherever you are in the world from the comfort of your own home. But it can be difficult for American buyers traveling to France to look at properties. Brad, how can you help your fellow Americans find a property in France?
It's a good question. I think that ultimately the first thing to discuss is sort of anticipation. As an American who's bought and sold in the US, and as an American who's bought and sold in France, I speak the language of both nations essentially when it comes to real estate, which all of our agents do. And that means that we're comfortable with the idea of the differences between the two countries and how things work here. So we're able to anticipate things that clients are going to be confused about, and hopefully be able to just stave off that concern as fast as we can. Also speaking the language, obviously being able to speak French fluently and being able to speak English fluently, it makes it more seamless when it comes to actually negotiating, but also explaining to the clients when there are things that may be a little confusing regarding simple things like, for example, homeowners association and so forth and so on. So I think once you've front loaded that information, it makes a big difference. Subsequently, when I have clients who are actually interested in purchasing, whether it be in my area or if they decide to go somewhere else, it's always nice to be educated up front. And so I start usually with a video call like this to discuss the actual process with the clients, but also to sort of really get some understanding about what their remit is and what they're looking for as far as criteria are concerned. And it's a very nice back and forth between me and the clients, where I'll send them listings, they'll send me listings. Sometimes they send me stuff from Pinterest to show me what kind of designs they like inside properties. And you know, it's a good process to start off with, because then what happens is when they get here, some clients, believe it or not, spend 3-4 days visiting and looking at properties. So there's not a lot of time. You have to be pretty concise, and I try and curate the best possible set of visits that I can. Another big thing I think I'd like to mention is it's really important to come to an area before you decide on the area and spend your time visiting the area as opposed to looking at properties and just looking at properties, because it really does make a difference. You want to know that you're keen on the place, and it may not be Bordeaux and it could be somewhere else, which is fine. We've got agents throughout France, but it's important to be able to do that so that when they get here, they can make an educated decision, because time is of the essence. Clients are coming from pretty far away. I mean, we have clients from as far away as Hawaii in the US. So it makes a big difference to be prepared and to have a nice curated set of visits put together so that we can go back for a second visit or a third, answer all the questions they may have, and then essentially pull the trigger on a purchase if necessary. We're also comfortable with clients going back home, chewing on it for a while, and then coming back, and hopefully those properties will still be available. Hope that answers your question.
Lovely, thanks, Brad. That's great. We're also often asked by American buyers if loans are available for real estate in France. Sharon, can you talk about French mortgages for a little bit?
Yes, certainly. I actually was speaking to a customer today, and they had their mortgage approval there from New York, and they said, well, we read on the internet that we couldn't get a mortgage. They were absolutely amazed that you've actually got us a mortgage. And I think that's one of the things. Don't just read what you see, believe what you read on the internet. Actually speak to the professionals, because yes, as a US resident, as a US citizen or taxpayer, you can get a French mortgage. French mortgages are very different to mortgages in the US, and they do take longer to obtain. There's more paperwork involved, but that's why a specialist broker such as myself and the CAFP team can really help you. Some of the main differences of how mortgages work in France, because I can speak for hours about mortgages, so I will just keep it concise, is you will be required to put down a deposit. As a non-resident buyer, your down payment on a mortgage will generally be between about 20 and 30% of the property purchase price. You will be required to pay the purchase fees in addition on top of your personal down payment. Our interest rates are fixed generally for duration. A typical term is between 15 and 25 years. Depending on your age, the maximum duration for the end of the mortgage generally tends to be 75 years old. So a mortgage needs to be paid off by your 75th birthday. In terms of how we calculate how much you can borrow in France, France has very strict laws, and they are laws. It's actually the French government that sets them on how much lenders can lend you. It's based on affordability calculations. Each bank then has a slightly different interpretation of how to assess the affordability of the mortgage. But the general rule of thumb is that your debt related, your financial commitments, including any existing US mortgages, excluding escrow, so just the capital and the amortization, and the existing loans, and the new French mortgage cannot be any more than 35% of your taxable income. So if you're employed, that will be the income that's on your W-2. If you're self-employed, we'll be looking at your tax returns, etc. We can use things such as bonuses, variable parts of your income if you receive like RSUs, which vest, etc. Every bank will look at them a little bit differently, and the majority will take an average of your income over a 3-year duration. So affordability is a big thing, but we will also look at the property that you purchase, and the property you purchase will often have an energy rating attached to it, from A through to G. And the interest rate and the availability of mortgage will depend on the energy rating of the property. So sometimes you may be required to finance renovation work to improve the energy performance. And that's where we will work with the agents such as Brad really closely to make sure that you get the exact finance for the sort of property that you're looking at, so that you don't have any bad surprises. We can finance renovation works, we can finance swimming pools, we can finance and refit of the property to make it specific to your requirements. I won't talk anymore about French mortgages. We've got a lot to cover, but the real take home for me is that everybody's case is different, and it's important to get individual advice and not just believe what you read on the internet. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Sharon. I know it is a big topic to answer in a short amount of time. So in the time between making an offer and signing that first contract and through to completion, the exchange rate between the euro and the dollar can shift significantly. It can make quite a difference to the price of the property. If you're lucky, it'll move in your favour, but what if it doesn't? It might not. So Jonathan, perhaps you could explain how currency companies can help mitigate any risks.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Yeah, very good question, because the currency rate you get is ultimately going to determine what you're actually paying for the property. And when you sign that compromis de vente, you're obviously signing up to agree to purchase the property. but you're actually agreeing, if you're buying the property in dollars, you're sort of agreeing to become a currency trader as well, because you're going to have to make some sort of a decision on exchanging that money at some point. So if anyone's tried to sort of gamble on the rate this year, unfortunately, the dollar has dropped against the euro. And interestingly, that wasn't some of the forecasts at the beginning of the year. So it just shows how uncertain things can be. So this is why having an appropriate currency strategy is really essential to buying an overseas property. A little bit like Brad mentioned about having a chat with the client initially, just to understand your requirements. That's certainly something we like to do at Lumen as well, because there's not really one exact answer with currency. It really does come down to the individual. You could be on a very tight budget. You might be prepared to wait a little bit more to see if rates improve. As I say, there's a number of different ways to approach it. But in terms of, I think the answer to the question is asking more about ways to actually fix in and lock in a rate. Well, there's two main options with Lumon. The very first step with the process is to register a totally free trading account, and you get instant access to what we call a Euro wallet. So it's a Euro bank account effectively that you can use even if you've not been able to open up an account in France yet. You can use your Lumon Euro account. It's very similar to an escrow account or a client account that we operate for you, and you can then purchase your euros, hold them there, so the rate's then locked in, and then we pay from there directly to the notaire. So you can pay a deposit, hold the funds there, and then pay out the rest down the line. So that's peace of mind and certainty of your costs. The second option, the second way really to lock in a rate, is something called a forward contract. Now this really involves you paying a deposit, normally 5%, with an agreement to pay the rest at a date in the future. So we're typically talking a good 3 months from the compromis de vente, the initial contract, to the acte de vente, the completion. So that'd be a typical timescale. If you've got money in the stock market, if you're selling a property in the US, if that's how you're going to finance this, but you don't have the money as cash, as liquid money to actually physically buy the euros, then you could use one of these forward contracts to lock in the rate, so you know exactly what those euros are going to cost when you come to pay for them, and then you can keep your money working in your investments or stock markets or in property until you get to that completion. So those are really the two main mechanisms there to lock in a rate. We can get more technical and clever if you are looking to be a bit smarter and try and capture some perfect moment if the rates do improve. But as people have found out this year, the rates don't always go your way. So very important to have a good strategy in place.
Thanks, Jonathan. So once people have bought a property, they can go ahead and enjoy their place in France. And there's no limits on buying property, as we said before, but there are limits on how long you can stay in France as you're a non-EU national, including Americans, of course. So you can only spend 90 days within 180 days in the EU, which includes, of course, France. After that, you need a visa, a visitor visa, a long stay visa. So, Alison, I know it's a big subject, but would you like to go through the key points that people should know about the visa process, the visitor visa process?
Absolutely. So first thing to know is that a visitor visa is going to be for you if you want to spend more than 90 out of 180 days in France. But if you're not going to be working, and what type of visitor visa you're going to get is going to depend on whether or not you intend to establish residence in France, or whether you just want to stay for longer than 3 months, but then go home at the end of your stay and return to the US. There are a lot of other kinds of visas that I'm not going to discuss in this answer because of time. We're going to talk about them a little bit later, but for a visitor visa, there's a temporary visa, which can be anywhere from 3 to 12 months. And that's if you want to go home at the end of your stay, you don't want to establish residence, you don't want to get on a French healthcare system, you don't want to exchange your driver's license, you don't want to become any type of resident in France. And you can reapply for this in your home country regularly every year if you want to spend like 6 months every summer in France, for example. The main criteria that they're going to look at are your financial resources. and you're going to need to have private health coverage, private insurance policy. Whether or not you eventually become eligible to register on the French healthcare system is going to depend on if you have a visa that leads to establishing residence in France that you are then going to be able to renew. They're also looking at, do you have a place to stay? So obviously, if you buy a property first, you have that address where you're going to be able to stay. It's not a requirement to own property. You can also rent and find property and look for the home that you're going to buy after you arrive in France with the visa.
Lovely. Thanks, Alison. I know you've just touched the whole subject, but there's lots more to say, but that's a good overview. So as you said, part of the visa application process, you need to show you've got financial means to support yourself while in France and have health insurance. But Paulette, how is that different, that the health insurance you need for a visa policy, how is that different to the mutuelle insurance that people have once they're settled in France and have access to state healthcare?
So the private health insurance that you need to accompany your visa application, it's got specific requirements, one of which is repatriation. The idea of it is when you first arrive in France, if you fall ill, that you're not then a burden on the French system, that you're given emergency treatment, and if need be, you're repatriated back to the US. The cover can start quite basic, as long as it covers those minimum requirements for the visa application. You can get really quite basic cover that's going to cover that repatriation, accident and emergency. It's not going to give you a lot of cover though if you're just generally ill. So there are the reason where as a broker that we can, everybody's circumstances are different. So yes, you can start with the minimum because that's what you need to get your visa. That's the aim. But you can also build on that, and we work with several different companies. So if you've got pre-existing health conditions, or if you want more cover, if you want to be covered if you have dental treatment or going to the doctors, things like that, you can then build on that. Obviously, the more cover you have, the more it's going to cost. But I would say in real terms, compared to the cost of health insurance and healthcare in the US, it's usually quite a nice, pleasant surprise for our US clients. I mean, even if you've got the basic cover just for accident and emergency, and you go to a GP, to a doctor, because you're feeling, you think you've got tonsillitis or something like that, it's going to cost you €30. It's really, really okay. And then if you go and get the medication afterwards, you might, I don't know, maybe spend 20, 30 euros on, a bag. You will literally have a bag of medicine in France if you go to see a doctor as well. So, the cover can be basic, but you can build it up. Once you have a social security number, if that's what you're going to do, if you're going to become resident and you apply for a social security number, then you can transfer over to what's called a mutuelle top-up policy. And what that does is it tops up the refund that you get from the state. So that's quite different to the private health insurance, but it's a lot cheaper too. So I hope that's giving quite a broad answer. I could, like the others, I could probably talk for an hour on the subject, but I'll try and keep it short.
And it is a very important subject, but unfortunately, yes, we do need to move on. So, but on the same topic, there have been some headlines recently in the news about a proposal to introduce new healthcare fees for Americans in France. Alison, can you comment on that at all?
Absolutely. So there has been some news in France recently with discussions of the budget about imposing a healthcare fee for people who are on visitor visas or people who are residing in France who are not paying into the system. So under the current system, you may have heard of something called PUMA, which is Protection Universelle Maladie. And this is the 2016 law that enables anyone residing in France legally for more than 3 months to be registered with the French healthcare system. And the reason that this is a little bit not controversial, but the reason why it's coming up is because PUMA enables you to join the healthcare system, and your contribution or your insurance premium to be in the French system is based on a 6.5% tax of your passive income. And so this passive income typically includes anything like rental income, interest, dividends, but it excludes retirement pensions. And it it has a 23,000 euro approximately exemption for each individual person. So somebody who's American, who is retired, moving to France under the current system on a visitor visa, and who has mainly like Social Security income, 401k, IRA distributions, things like that, they're not going to be paying into the French healthcare system with a PUMA contribution. Now, if you have primarily, rental income or a high amount of capital gains or other types of passive income, you may end up paying to some extent. So what the budget is potentially going to do is assess a fee to register for the healthcare system. And of course, this would become mandatory for people who are again, registering for the system, but not working and paying social charges into the healthcare system. According to the most recent news that I read, this is going to be set by decree later, so we don't have any information of how much that might cost. But as Paulette just explained about the cost of French healthcare, I would expect that the fee would be exceptionally reasonable compared to what you might pay in the US to be on a similar or less good healthcare policy.
That's reassuring to hear. Thanks, Alison. So just stepping back to buying, France is a vast country with such a changes in scenery, from mountains to coastline, vineyards, pretty little villages, cities full of culture. It can be really, really difficult deciding where to invest or where to move to. Joanna, could you give a little insight into areas that are popular with Americans and perhaps some areas that are less well known?
Yes, certainly. And in fact, over the last few years, Americans have actually become our third highest nationality for buying properties in France. So it goes French, British, Americans, and then internationals. So it's extremely popular. If you ask any of our agents, they'll tell you that their area is obviously the best because that's where they live there and they love it there, so etc. A lot of holiday homes are bought in Paris because the Americans do like a holiday home in Paris. But if you're coming with a family and you want to live there, the areas like where Andrew is, where Brad is, beautiful old cities, lovely cities. Where Brad is near the wine region. Andrew in the south of France, you can pop over to Spain, in less than a day. And I think the lovely thing about France is it's so historic. The buildings are beautiful. You've got this most amazing countryside. It's the biggest country in Western Europe. So when you're driving through, you haven't got the traffic that you may have in other countries, apart from in some of the cities. I would definitely agree with Brad when he said, do a recce trip, go over and see the areas, go and have a look around the areas, talk to some fellow Americans or talk to some fellow people that have bought there. But it is what I will say. I mean, I live in the Dordogne and we have a huge amount of Americans here, and I know both Brad and Andrew do in their own areas as well. The family life is fantastic. Children can go out on their bikes, it's safe, they come home when they're hungry. It's like a bit like going back in time in some of the rural areas. Of course, you've got the wonderful cheese and wine across the whole of France. But one little tip I would say is that you can be too rural. So I would be careful about, I've always said, pick your favorite city or pick your favorite big town and draw 35 minutes around that. So where I am, I'm in the countryside. So I've got the beautiful countryside, but in 25 minutes, I'm into Angoulême, which has got a 2-hour train to Paris, a half-hour train to Bordeaux. So I get the best of both worlds. If I was an hour away from Angoulême, that would be slightly too far if I just needed to go and get light bulbs that you can't get in the local store, or so, things like that. And the other things to bear in mind, depending on your age, is your healthcare. How far do you need to be from a hospital? How far do you need to be from a medical centre if you need to get prescriptions and things like that? I can't say that I've been in France for 23 years and I've travelled around the country seeing all of our wonderful agents and the teams, and I can't say that there's been an area that I've thought, oh, I couldn't live here. In fact, half the time I want to move into every area that I'm in, so it's quite difficult to give a perfect area. But I will say that I really don't think you can go wrong do your recce trips. You know, don't be too rural, because that can be difficult. Be close to a city or a town, and do your research online. I mean, we're making loads of different YouTube videos exploring. We did one recently on Bordeaux, where we did a video touring Bordeaux, and people have come because of that. So you know, have a look at the history. Is fantastic. So I mean, I probably could say that you really can't go wrong. If you're going for family life, it's nice. You've got the wonderful countryside. You can have your chickens and your vegetable patches and things like that. So yeah, I would say that, you know, you really can't go wrong in France.
And I would agree with that. And that's a very good tip about not being too far from a big city. You can be easily seduced by a sort of rural idyll, but you want some life fairly close by as well as the amenities.
Especially in the winter time, when a lot of things close down in the rural communities.
Sure. So let's give Andrew and Brad a little chance to wax lyrical about their own regions. Andrew, what do you love about where you live?
Well, first of all, Karen, I would say, depending on what you like, it's going to be, obviously that's subjective. But what I would say about the area that I live in is it doesn't matter what you like. There's something here for you, because we essentially we have first of all, it's sunshine, lots of sunshine down here, 300 days of sunshine per year. We've got the Mediterranean coast, just a short drive from here. Less than an hour to the north, we've got the Black Mountains. So if you're really into the mountains, you like that, you can go there. There are skiing areas around here in the winter. You can see the Pyrenees from here. It's the biggest wine region in, I think the Minervois is the biggest wine region in Occitanie, and it's just one of the biggest departments that produce wine in all of France down here. I think that's due probably to a lot of the sunshine. So we're essentially close to the Corbière, the Minervois. We've got the Mediterranean coast. Narbonne is fantastic as well. That's about an hour drive from here. Which Narbonne, if you're not, maybe you don't know this, but I just recently found out that Narbonne was actually one of the largest port cities during the Roman times, and they exported quite a lot of wine and the amphores, which were the clay pots that they transported a lot of the oils and wines in the time. We've got Toulouse, just an hour and 15 minutes to the west. Montpellier's a short distance. So everything is very accessible. It's easy to access the larger areas. There's a train station in the center of Carcassonne, an airport. Toulouse has an airport internationally. I've recently taken a flight directly to Montreal, Canada, from Toulouse, and then from Carcassonne itself, I flew down to Cagliari in Italy, in Sardinia. They have flights all over Europe from Carcassonne direct, all over Europe and even Africa now as well. So there's tons of places you can do, but Carcassonne itself is known for the medieval city, which is the medieval walled city that you see if you search Carcassonne on the internet, which is just an incredible place to be. Karen, you had a property down here. You know the area quite well, I'm sure. You know how fantastic it is.
It is. It's a beautiful area. So much history and gorgeous scenery. But as Joanna says, you know, everywhere you go in France, everywhere I go is my new favorite place.
Exactly. And what's really cool too is they have concerts in the summertime in July. I saw Alanis Morissette this year. Robert Plant came this year. Last year we had a few well-known bands that came down here as well to play. But I think overall the thing that brought me here is, besides the sunshine, besides everything else, it's just the cost of living here is fantastic. You're getting kind of the beauty that you would get in the Côte d'Azur or Provence. It kind of reminds me of Tuscany here in this area, but without the price tag of that. So I think that's one of the strong points would be, I would say, the great affordable value to the properties down here. And then the food down here is fantastic. We're known for the cassoulet down here from Castelnaudary, which is nearby as well. There's festivals and there's just so much to do down here. I love it. I absolutely love it. I've lived in several locations throughout France in the 15 years that I've been here. And I've been here for 7 years now, and I don't have any plans of leaving. Absolutely love it.
Well, I think you've sold it very well. I mean, I know it's a lovely area, but yeah, so as with so many areas in France. And Brad, you're over in Bordeaux. Tell us more about your area.
It's a big city, but it's a walkable city. I came from Boston, where I was 10 years prior to moving to France about 8 years ago. And there's a lot of similarities, not climate-wise. Certainly it's a lot colder in Boston, but as far as the actual vibe of the city, population, the number of university students, not only undergrad, but also graduate students and then professional degrees. So the average age here is young, which means it's a dynamic city as far as things to do year round. I think that just goes without saying as far as big cities are concerned. We're not huge, but we're big enough where you have access to pretty much everything. Transportation's a big part of my daily life, from, you know, public transportation, whether it be buses, tram, or even the boat that takes you back and forth across the river, which is all part of the same system, but also access to major metropolitan locations outside of Bordeaux via train or plane. So that's a huge plus. It's, you know, not for nothing that during the time that they included the LGV from Paris down to Bordeaux in 2 hours, we started to see a very large influx of people moving their families down here. So it's been the place to move to and to be in France year in and year out for a long time. And then we have proximity to the ocean. The Atlantic coast isn't far. There are lots of wonderful places to visit around the area. Someone mentioned, I think it was wine. You know, that's one part, but obviously that also goes without saying, coming from Bordeaux. I think one thing I sort of can't stop telling people is, when you're looking for a place to live, you want to find a place that people are going to want to come visit more than once if you're hoping to have visitors. And there are some people that want to get away and have their own time apart. But if your intent is to come over here and live for an extended period of time and you want to have visitors come, it's important to be in a place that they're going to want to come back to, and it's not too onerous to get to. So if you're, you know, flying in and out and then having to take multiple different forms of transportation, or you're out far enough removed where the first visit's exciting because it's novel, unique, but then the second or third time starts to become a burden, I think that's important to think about as well. And that's the kind of stuff that I think people need to be seriously considering as well when they're looking at a property, but also a location. Other than that, you know, I love it here. And so I can't say more, but I could, I'm sure. But ultimately, you know, it's a question of finding the right place, like we were talking about earlier, making sure it's right for you, and then just talking to the right people.
Thanks, Brad. And I think there's a really good point about the size of French cities compared to American cities. You know, people might think they don't want to live in a city, but they go to France and they find it's a very different proposition to the French city, the American city they called home in the US. So yeah, great point. Okay, so moving back to visas, we covered visitor visas, and Alison, you sort of just mentioned work visas. What about people who want to work in France or want to move there permanently? How does the visa process work for them?
Absolutely. So if you want to work in France, you absolutely 1000% need to have a visa that enables you to work in France. You are not allowed to work on a visitor visa, and it's really important that I stress that, because there's a lot of bad information online that tells you that you can work on a visitor visa. So there's a couple of different ways that people can work. All of these ways are encompassed in about 25 different visa types. So I'm not going to be able to get into the details of each one, but our book, Foolproof French Visas, which is coming out, the 2026 edition is coming out in January, goes through all of them very specifically. So obviously you can get sponsored for a job. Now, if you have a low salary and you don't have a high degree, you need to get work authorization, and a French company basically needs to prove that they tried to hire a French person to do the job and couldn't find anybody. The alternative is that you have a French master's degree, or that you get paid a really high salary of about 60,000 euros. That puts you in the 95th percentile of French salaried employers. So it may not sound very high for American ears, but that is an extremely high salary in France. You can also set up to be self-employed or establish a French company, which would enable you to invoice clients in France and around the world. So if you are working remotely, if you are self-employed, if you are a consultant or something like that, we could help you to set up a French company to be able to continue working with US or UK or French-based clients or anything like that, so that you could basically sponsor yourself to work in France as a self-employed person. If you're an EU citizen or the spouse of an EU citizen or the spouse of a French citizen, you're going to have the right to work in France without being sponsored. And so then you're on a family and private life visa that would enable you to get any type of salaried or self-employment work. And finally, there are a couple of special programs if you're under 35, if you've done a master's degree in France, if you want to work in France temporarily, and there are some jobs that will sponsor you for, or visa types where you can get sponsored for a very short amount of time, or specific types of contracts like teaching English, being an English assistant in a university, things like that, where you can live in France for a short time, but not necessarily extend your time beyond a year or a year and a half. So lots of different options, and I would encourage you to really consider the visa type that you want to establish yourself long-term in France. Take a look at what the pathways to long-term residence and naturalization are, because not all visa types can lead to getting a 10-year resident card or applying for a French passport down the line, and make sure that those options are available to you by getting the right visa type. And I would encourage you to look at the details in our book.
Thanks, Alison. And as you say, it's really important to get it right from the start, to choose the right visa, because it can have an effect on how you live in France in the future. So yeah, lots more you could talk about, I'm sure, but that's very, very well explained. So once you have your home in France, you probably think you don't need a currency company anymore, but there are ways that foreign exchange companies can help owners, homeowners, such as regular payment plans, aren't there, Jonathan?
Yes, absolutely. The bills don't stop the moment you purchase the property. You're going to have all sorts of other costs down the line. Obviously, if you're having a holiday home, naturally upkeep, etc., to send money over there. If it's a permanent move, perhaps you're still going to have money in the US or from elsewhere you're going to be bringing in. So there's a number of different ways that we can manage that. We can do, literally, as you said, the kind of regular payment. We can set up almost an automated system with we call it in the UK, a direct debit, like a standing order, an automatic payment to Lumon, and then we'll automatically convert into euros and send it to your French bank. So very simple and straightforward. You can almost forget about it. On certain days of the month, you're going to have X or Y coming into your French bank account. Other clients will let a sort of pot build up, their pension or investment, whatever it might be, and then do it in chunks according to how the rate's performing. That's where a currency specialist like me can come in use. I can tell you what's going on in the market and important news or events that are coming up to help you try and take advantage of the market. So we can also do online trading as well, where you can manage everything online yourself. But here at Lumon, we're very proud that we do still have people on the telephone, like myself, hopefully for the future. The robots and AI haven't quite taken over yet. So there'll always be someone at the end of the phone to sort of chat through the market, talk to you about your money, and try and help with a solution. So yes, those FX, foreign exchange requirements will continue. Again, you might have investments in the US, say money in the stock market, other properties over there. There's often, there are always other costs people have. You may one day sell the property in France and go back to the US, or you might have rental income in France that you send back to the US. So any smaller payments, not just solely for the property transaction, we can definitely help with.
Thanks, Jonathan. That all sounds very straightforward, which is great news. Alison, we've been hearing from people in America who are worried about news stories on restrictions on getting residence in France on a visitor visa, or with primarily foreign income. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Sure. So a visitor visa has always been renewable for 1 year, and renewable every year indefinitely. So there's been some talk recently. Naturalizations have been significantly restricted by Rotellot, who has been applying the criteria for naturalization more strictly. So those are down 28% just on the basis of like no laws have changed. They're just looking more closely at everyone's application. And one of the criteria that they are applying is that they are looking at where your income comes from. And so if you are American or British or Canadian and you have most of your income that is coming from outside of France, specifically because you're retired, then they are not taking that into account in terms of financial integration. Now, there's been a little bit of news about this because there were some people who are rejected. However, this isn't really a new thing, and it's always been a criteria of applying to become French to show that you are integrated. And one of the criteria has always been, financial and professional integration. And so if you are not paying taxes into the French system, because if you're American, your Social Security, a lot of your investment income is only taxed in the US. We have the oldest and most favorable tax treaty between the US and France. Unfortunately, that does put you at a little bit of a disadvantage because you're not going to be paying income tax into the French system. So it's been in the news, but it's really not new. It was in the very first edition of Foolproof French Visas back in 2019. And typically you're not going to have a path to a 10-year resident card or a naturalization if you're on a visitor visa, not working, not paying into the French system. I will say, though, that you can continue to renew your visitor visa every year as long as you can prove that you still reside in France, you're covered in the French healthcare system, you have a French bank account that you were using, and you're showing that you're actually residing in France and integrating here. The procedure is done online, so it's relatively straightforward, and then you just have to go pick up your card at the prefecture once a year. And part of the new immigration law from January 2024 was that for certain types of visas, you are going to be restricted on how many times you can renew those visa types, but the visitor visa does not have any restrictions applied. So you can conceivably, renew your visitor visa annually for, 15 years without a problem. It's a little bit annoying, but it will not negatively impact your ability to stay in France long-term if you are not working here.
Thanks for explaining that, Alison. That was good to hear. So finally, let's ask our American panelists for their top tips for making the most out of life in France. Brad, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I've been here almost 8 years, but my experience with France has been a long love affair for a whole host of reasons. And certainly one of the things I think is really important for people to think about is drop the preconceived notions, because that's exactly what there are. They're preconceived. And we live in a very, very large world, but at the same time, the lines and so forth are crossed all the time. So France is not so different than the United States for so many different reasons. We still put our shoes on the same way here as they do over in the US. The second thing is, I think it's important to put yourself out there. You remember what it was like when you had your first day in your new school and you had that sort of first day jitters, and now we're adults and you're not a kid anymore. So this is an opportunity to actually get to take advantage of that, because people here are curious. When you're the new kid on the block, they want to know about you. And I think that is really a great starting point, is to just keep an open mind and remember that being an American is not a negative thing in any way, shape, or form, because we're not making decisions at the top level over in the US. So nobody here is going to be holding you to whatever current political situation the US is in, whether it be now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. They may be curious, they may want to ask questions or your opinion, and that's always been an open conversation and never taboo. The second thing is, I think it's important to really recognize that as an American coming to France, there are so many components of us as Americans moving to a country like France that has so many positive things, where we can take all of the best of what we have as Americans, you know, from a personality perspective, and put that to use here. And I think that the great thing about it is that when you've grown up in a system that's very administrative, which, you know, we didn't really talk about, but obviously we'll certainly have questions about at some point, I'm sure, moving forward, you can take advantage of the fact that you're used to navigating perhaps systems that may be more difficult. Perhaps we have a more insightful way of handling things. And the people that are here who've lived that way their whole lives, not to say that it's bad because it works, may not necessarily have the same insightful approach to it because they've just become, and I hate to use the word defeatist or complacent, but there is some of that here. And I think as an American coming to France, take advantage of that. And it's not to say that we're all like that, but I think that if you're able to navigate the system, which I think is very doable, then it makes life a whole lot easier. So that would be my recommendation.
That's really interesting. Thanks, Brad. And Andrew, what would your top tips be?
My first tip would be, prior to planning on coming to France, or when let's say you found a house that you love, there's obviously going to be a 2-3 month waiting period. I would start preparing for the move by learning the language. And by that, I don't mean installing Duolingo on your phone. Obviously, it does have its uses as a supplement to language learning, but perhaps like joining the Alliance Française, maybe in your local area, getting to actually like joining an immersion type of school to learn the language, or even there's some really great online tools that you can use. For example, I used italki at one point, and I had a professor that spoke 3-4 languages, and usually you can find different teachers all over the world depending on your budget, things like that. And that way you've got somebody face to face to really help you learn the language. So I think learning the language prior to coming here is extremely important. I would also say learn about the culture too, and not just the cliches about France and things like that. But I mean, like, learn, watch French movies, read French books, Camus, or Proust, or Dumas. Really get into, if you like reading, read French authors. If you like movies, find some really great old French movies, for example. I would also say that when you get here, France is very well known for their associations, their clubs. And every town, every village generally has dozens of different clubs. It could be sports related, it could be other things. For example, where I live, they have a hiking club, they have a boxing club, they have chess clubs, they have genealogy clubs, if you like knitting, things like that. And I think that's the best way to really get out there and meet people. And I know some people really think like to kind of go directly towards the expat communities right away. The issue with the expat communities, I would say, is that a lot of them are that you're not really forced into the French culture. You're hanging out with other Americans, for example, and by doing so, you're not really going to learn about the culture. And personally, I didn't leave the United States to be surrounded by other Americans. You know, I kind of escaped the United States in some ways to come here. So I'd say get to know the French people. The French are extremely interesting people, really great people to be around. They're very cultural, very cultured, very interesting. And I think I would also maybe avoid making comparisons between the US and France on everything. I kind of tended to do that quite a bit when I first got here. And I kind of learned to stop doing that. But I think the biggest thing, people hear this all the time though, I think is, so it's nothing new, but to really embrace the slowness of life here in France. Sundays, for example, it's kind of a sacred day. People in general don't work. A lot of stores are closed. They may be open just in the morning for a couple of hours so you can get your baguette or something. But in general, between 12 and 2, people go home, have a sit-down lunch. They sit at their table and eat. They're not just eating while they're walking with a cup of Starbucks in their hand or something. So I'd say really embrace the slower pace of France. It's fantastic. That's my advice. And again, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to have a conversation with you. That's part of the process when a new client comes to me. We usually do, like Brad said, I do the same thing. We do a video call, ask about what they're looking for to try to find the lifestyle, where you want to live, what you like, and that sort of thing. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. As I'm married to a French woman, I've been here for 14 years, and I've got French nationality now. I started off with a 1-year visa and eventually got the 10-year and got the nationality. So I've been through the whole process, which is quite difficult. So Allison, I don't know how you do it. I praise you for all the hard work you do to help our clients. But anyway, I just want to say thank you too for having me. I'm very grateful to be part of the webinar tonight.
Thanks, Andrew. There's some great advice there. And finally, Alison, what would your advice be to Americans buying property or moving to France?
Sure. So my biggest tip that I always tell people is that the first thing you want to do, or very early on in the process, is to explore your visa options and make sure that you're getting something that is going to enable you to have long-term residence, to build the life in France that you want to have. So you want to start as you mean to continue. If you intend to work, be self-employed, work remotely, something like that, then you're going to want to look at what visa types will enable you to do that. That will lead to a 10-year resident card eventually. What are those requirements going to be? There's a lot of new requirements that have come into effect or that are going into effect starting in January that we didn't even touch on, but that we have updated in the Foolproof French Visas book. Visitor visa is not necessarily the worst option if your plan is to retire and to take advantage of everything that France has to offer in terms of lifestyle and travel. But if you're younger and you're not able to or planning to retire yet, then it's definitely not going to be the ideal choice for your situation. So really make sure that you understand what the consequences are of the visa type that you select. I also wanted to echo what Andrew said about joining local associations, but I do want to encourage you to join, expat groups as well. There's Arrow, which advocates for the rights of Americans living overseas. There's a lot of things in the news right now about, there's a senator that's proposed a bill to prevent Americans from having double nationality. There have been attacks on the rights of Americans living overseas in terms of voting, and Arrow is a 50-plus-year organization that has advocated for the rights of Americans living outside of the U.S. To be able to vote, to be able to transmit nationality to our children, and all of the rights that we need to protect in terms of, access to public services and Social Security and embassy services and things like that as Americans living abroad. So I'm on the board of Arrow. I encourage you to join. It's a really important organization that can help with a lot of, some of the administrative stuff back in the US that is going to be a little bit harder once you are no longer living in the States. I also just think, it's really important to join French associations and make contacts with local people, but I think it's also important to, have the support or to have community with people who have gone through what you are going through, and people who are going through it at the same time as you. And those are two different kind of sets of, immigrant friends. And I think it's really important to make those connections. And like Andrew, I really did not do that during my first, 8 to 10 years in France, but I think I would have benefited from having a little bit more of a connection with some of the American groups that I didn't really develop until later. And then finally, you need to understand that getting the visa is the beginning of your move to France and it's not the end. So it's really important that you get the right visa and that it puts you on a path to residence or naturalization if that's something that you want. But I know that people are often overwhelmed and, impressed by the process of getting a visa. And then they think, okay, well, that's done. Like now I can live in France and that's it. But remember that it has taken you your whole life until adulthood to do all of the administrative things back in the US, like getting set up with Social Security and getting healthcare and getting cable and getting a lease and having car insurance and getting a driver's license and all of those things that you have done from birth until now, you now have to do them basically within a year or a year and a half in France. And so that's where my team and I come in, is helping you to understand all of the different admin things you need to do to set up. But it is a really big project and it's something that you are going to need to spend a lot of time and energy doing during your first year while you're figuring out your neighborhood, while you're learning French, while you're making friends. And it's a really big, life-changing project, not to be underestimated. I think everybody on this panel will say that it is extremely worth it. And I think that, and everybody here is here to help you, but I think we would also all say that it is a lot of work and there's a lot of stuff to do. And, you know, don't think that getting to France and buying your house is the end, because you're really just getting started and there's a whole new chapter to follow.
That's a great way to end, a whole new chapter to follow. And as you have all said, how wonderful to be able to mix new French friends and new expat friends and have the best of all. So that does bring us to the end of this webinar. Thank you to all of you for joining us. The next webinar will be on the 21st of January. You'll receive details by email about how to register for it, and you'll also receive a recording of this webinar, which is really, really handy if you want to listen back to any bits you might have missed or just go over bits again. We'll also include in that email the contact details for all the panelists. They're all very happy to answer your questions. There's lots we covered today and lots we didn't cover today, as you would expect. So their details will be in there. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with them. So just before we leave, I'll hand over to our panelists to say their farewells. So Joanna?
Yes, good night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I've got lots of information on our website, so do have a look at that if there's any other questions we haven't answered tonight. And hopefully see you all in France very soon.
Thank you. Andrew?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, the panelists, for letting me join you this evening. And I look forward to seeing you soon in the sunny south of France.
Lovely, thanks. And Brad?
Thanks so much, Karen, for organizing this. We really appreciate it here in Bordeaux. Anytime you guys have questions, you know where to find me. So I look forward to meeting some of you. And good luck on your new adventure.
Thank you. And Alison?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Happy to answer all of your questions about visas. Typically, you want to start at least 3 months before moving to France if you're a visitor, and 6 to 8 months if you're starting a business or anything like that. And the new version of Foolproof French visas will be available at the beginning of January. And so we'll make sure that you are on the lookout for the 2026 edition, because there have been quite a few changes. See you soon.
Thanks, Alison. And Paulette? Shall we move on to Sharon? I think Paulette's just got a little issue with the sound. Sharon?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I wish everybody a very happy end to the year, and hopefully you'll get to spend your next Christmas in France. My best piece of advice, obviously I'm not American, I'm British, but I've been in France for 25 years. I came here as a foreigner, like everybody else, I presume. Is just speak to experts, don't rely on the internet, plan, and everything will work out wonderfully, because your expectations will be managed, and it makes life a lot easier. So have a lovely year end, and thank you all for this evening. It was lovely.
Thanks, Sharon. And Paulette? Oh, I think you're still maybe muted. Well, I'm sure what Paulette is saying is that if you have any questions about healthcare and insurance, she will be very happy to answer those questions and to help you. She is the expert in that field. Okay, and finally over to Jonathan.
Yes, thank you very much, Karen, for hosting. Thank you to all the panelists, and thank you, audience, for joining us. Hope you found it really useful. And yes, be very happy to talk to everyone about currency. The world's always changing, and the markets with it, and it will affect the buying power of your money over in France. So yeah, I'd be delighted to talk to anyone, and see you all in 2026.
Thanks, Jonathan, and thank you to all of you for joining us. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye bye.